Hi, my name is Jake Miller and you're on Ookfor.com under our Innovation sector. Today in Auckland, we did an interview with Sir Ray Avery. The key things we learned during this interview were the main things Kiwis do not do enough of when starting businesses, how and why one person can change the world, as well as insightful and motivational material from one of New Zealand's most outstanding leaders who grew up in an orphanage in London and then lived under a bridge. This is an interview you do not want to miss. If you have any interest in business, innovation or changing the world, check this interview out. Ookfor, wise word to wait. Sir Avery, thanks very much for joining us.
That's all right.
Appreciate your time. Ookfor is all about inspiring people to achieve extraordinary things. So who and what during your life and career has inspired you?
Well, I didn't have a lot of people who inspired me. What's happened in my life, particularly I think as I've got older, a lot of my heroes, dissolve, and I think that's really a reflection of how you grow. When you're young, you have a hero, and it might be the Lone Ranger or something, and then you grow up, and then you have particular icons, and often, these people get to a point in their life where they disappoint, and so in my early part of my life, I had very few heroes because I was in orphanages and abusive environments, and there wasn't any respite. For the first 14 years of life, there wasn't a lot of respite, but there was one guy who was my hero, I guess, retrospectively, and that was a guy called Jack Wise, who got me out from the orphanage, got me into the education system, and although he wouldn't be known to any other person on the whole planet, he changed my life, and then I was able to, in turn, I think, influence a lot of other people.
Yeah, absolutely, and one of the things you talk about in your book is obviously the tough upbringing you did have, and I guess, do you think it was your experiences as a youngster that today have influenced the way that you do create world-class medical equipment that benefits millions of people all over the world? Do you think your upbringing had a big influence on that?
I think that's a very profound question and very relevant for everybody, in that there's this kind of dichotomy between, is it nurture or nature that makes the man?
Yeah.
Does your environment determine who you are, or does your nature determine who you are? And I think that the reality is that it has to be a mix of both, and therefore I think I had a great nature that made me a survivor, because many of my contemporaries didn't survive. They ended up in Borstal or in jail, became murderers or rapists or terrible people. And I somehow managed, both through more by nature than nurture, to have the right characteristics to be careful about life and try and do something that was worthwhile. But you can't ever get away from that abuse. You can't ever get away from the terrible things. There's not one morning that I don't wake up and I go into my lovely shower and I turn on that tap and I get warm water out of it, and I kind of look up to the clouds and I say thank you, because I'm showering in a nice warm environment. I've got access to the tap. I'm not showering or having a bath at the end of the week and being the last person in a bath that 30 people have been in, So it makes you feel you don't need a lot once you've had nothing. And it gives you reflections on what's the value of life. So I'm never going to be driving around in a $150,000 car, because I know what that $150,000 can do for somebody in sub-Saharan Africa. How can I use that money to do something that's a much better thing for us and our planet? I actually don't need very much. I was used to living under a railway bridge, but I've now got a family, so I think about them and how I can nurture them and look after them. But it doesn't reflect badly on them, in the sense that I don't think, oh look, I've had it tough. I think you can have people who get very Edwardian and say, I had it tough, so there's a bit of gristle to chew on and you'll be fine, darling. I actually got the reverse, in the sense that I spoil them to bits because they're alive and I love them, and I hope that what I give them that's different is a knowledge set that says you can change the world.
And in New Zealand, do you think, and in first world countries all over the world, do you think we take those simple things for granted too much?
Oh, I think we do all the time, but again, I wouldn't recommend my starting life to give you reflections on having a warm shower.
Yeah.
But I think that we do often don't recognise how lucky we are. So for old Fred Dagg think we don't know how lucky we are. We live in a beautiful country. Often I would come back from a place like Nepal, where the King of Nepal had been assassinated by one of his relatives, and the whole country was in lockdown. I get on the plane, get back to New Zealand. I'm coming from the airport in a corporate cab, and the headlines are Helen Clark done for speeding on the way to All Black, All Black match.
Yeah.
And so we are so blessed in
Yeah.
New Zealand. And for me, New Zealand has allowed me to be the person I wanted to be.
And you as an individual, I mean, you're quite specific in the way that you go about your planning, almost working out how many days you have left in your life and working backwards. Do we plan enough as people?
Well, I think one of the things that's mad about us as a species is that we're the only species on the planet know we're going to die and do nothing about it. We sort of go through, it's like, John Lennon's song, life happens when you're making other plans. And most people get to the end of their life at the age of 80 or whatever, and death comes as a big bloody surprise. And they haven't done all the things. They've got a bucket list. What I've realised is that you actually have to live your life like it's your bucket list. So you try and live your life the way you want to live it. And recognise that rather like starting a business, you've got a finite number of days to get the business going. And at the end of the day, you really do need an exit strategy. How are you going to sell that business and capitalise on the investment of time and emotion that you've made? We don't do that with our lives. We should. And the best advice I can give to everybody is plan your life, reverse engineer it, work out how many days you've got left to live. So for me, it's 3,798 days and counting. I was blessed the other day because a friend of mine who's an epidemiologist said the lifespan in New Zealand is increasing by 6 hours per day. And I calculated it out, and I reckoned I had about 160 days that I didn't know that I had, so
really?
I could actually go out and splurge.
Yeah.
Have a bit of fun. No, but I do want to make my life valuable and worthwhile. So there's not a day that doesn't go by where I don't actually do an audit of the day's affairs. At the end of the day, I want to know I've done something that's worthwhile to justify my oxygen uptake on this planet. I don't want to waste my life. The brutalisation that I had as a young kid has to be justified against some productivity. Then it makes sense. You can't have all that happen to you without creating something that's wonderful. So I'm just beginning on that journey in the sense that there's 16 million people who can see because of some stuff that I invented around blindness prevention and cataract surgery. But we've got nutritional products that we think we can impact positively on 500 million children in sub-Saharan Africa in the next decade. We've got a whole range of IV infusion equipment. So there's a lot of things that I'm working on and trying to get to come to fruition and make the world better. And I'm not going to stop, I don't think, until I suspect when they're nailing the coffin lid on, that there'll be a little paw that comes out that says, I've got another idea.
And what would your advice be in regards to a satisfying career direction for the young people in New Zealand like myself who have about 2 billion seconds left? What would you say to those people?
Well, I spent a lot of time not only talking to my children but to other kids, whether it be from preschool right the way through to university students, to try and give that knowledge. Knowledge is very hard won in life, and the best thing you can do is talk to people about your experiences and share that with them so that they don't have to go through all the rubbish. They can get to the bottom line about how things work. So I'm very passionate about dispersing that knowledge to people. But my knowledge transfer would simply be around the fact that you need to do something that you love to do, because if you're not doing that, then it's going to be a hard yards for you. But much more importantly, you need to do the maths, and reverse engineer your life. Have a plan. If you've got a plan, you're going to be much more successful than any of your contemporaries, because you've got a plan. Even if you aim for the stars and miss and scud along and hit the horizon line, you're still going to be further ahead than anybody else who's not doing anything and doesn't have a plan. And the other really big thing is to be ferociously dangerous and dream really, really big. When I was living under the railway bridge, I didn't think that I would be able to impact on global blindness or any other discipline in the whole world. I wanted to own a bicycle shop. But what I've learned in life is that you can do much more than you think you can do by just kicking that ball out and chasing after it and dreaming really, really big. So I encourage everybody to have a go. Have a go and dream really big.
And speaking of that, I mean, your social enterprise, Medicine Mondial, I mean, it's amazing some of the stuff it's done at creating low-cost solutions to combat poverty and health in third world countries all over the world. So how did you get into this kind of work? What sparked you to actually start getting into this kind of work?
Well, I think it's like all people growing up, you're your ambitions in life change as you go through, and your knowledge base change. So when I was 16, I thought that I wanted to have my own bicycle shop, and I thought that I wanted to be loved, because I hadn't been loved by anybody, so my plan was to be loved, preferably by as many women as possible, and also then to make as much money as possible. And they were my goals for the next couple of decades. But once I'd achieved all of those things that I thought would make me happy, they didn't make me happy. And I then had to work out what was missing. What was missing for me was the ability to love other people. I was looking for love because I thought that would make me happy. When I started doing things for other people, I actually started to feel very happy. I actually felt I was worthwhile. And in doing so, I think if you're basically a good person, you attract good people around you. And I wouldn't have been able to find my lovely wife Anna if I hadn't become a good person. You know, I was a great corporate raider in the pharmaceutical industry, and we made money and we were successful. But it wasn't until I started looking after other people that I actually found not only did I find happiness, but I found what I interpret to be true success, and that is somebody whose life has been valuable to us as a species.
And you mentioned before, I think, that you're in a third world country and you saw firsthand exactly what was going on, and you went back to your hotel room and reflected on that. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I guess my catharsis for how I got involved in this work was I'd been sent to Eritrea in North Africa to build a laboratory for the Fred Hollows Foundation, and I found myself in a country that was completely munted. It had a 30-year war of independence, nothing was working. I was transported back to living under a railway bridge. I was in this hotel room, no running water, bathing in bottled water as I had been under the railway bridge. And I was going to phone Gabby Hollows the next day because Fred had conveniently died, and tell her that we couldn't build the laboratory there. And I'd drunk half a bottle of whiskey and felt sorry for myself, and decided that the best thing I could do was get out of that country and go back to Auckland and get on with my life. In the morning I got up and I queued in the queue, and there was a Basha woman, a Eritrean woman with a shawl around her back, and when she unwrapped it, because it started to cry, this baby had most of its eye missing and the side of its face burned to the bone with napalm burns. And I'd never seen war up front and personal in my life, so I ended up back in my hotel room not knowing what to do about life. And something happened in the middle of the night, and it was a catharsis about, maybe that's why my life had been so traumatic early on, was to make me annealed enough and tough enough to be able to help that little kid. Maybe that little kid was like the Ray Avery that was under the railway bridge. So I phoned Gabby and said it would be bloody difficult, near impossible to build the factory, but I'd do it. And we did. It took about a decade to get the factory going, get export going. But in that one moment, I think that was the transformation between Ray Avery, the corporate, person, to somebody who would dedicate the rest of his life to helping make healthcare accessible to those in need throughout the world. And I'd also acquired a whole range of other skills with a band of brothers around me that I managed to convince that we could change the world. And when you have that powerful perspective, you can do wonderful things.
And it's an extraordinary story. And I mean, just in summary, what would your advice be to all the people in the world who want to help this kind of thing, or want to get into this kind of science? What would you say to them?
What I would say, it's not just about whether you can do something in science or you can do something in business. It's actually about having a really useful life. There's nothing worse than a life that can't be justified or that has been ebbed away. So I would say you need to have a great dream. You need to have a great dream, a great passion. You need to love everybody around you and look after them, and live every day as if it's your last day, because it probably might be one day. And so for
one
me,
day you'll be right.
and so I think calculate how many days you've got left to live, and then try and be really dangerous about them and say, I want to do something. I want to justify my space on this planet. Because if you don't, you're just taking up oxygen. So do something really dangerous, something really clever. Love each other. Don't do anything at the expense of another person. Treat everybody like a customer. And for God's sake, love each other and care for each other. And we just may be able to, if we all do that, we can get rid of all that problems in all the countries where we're bombing each other and shooting each other, because there's nothing more important than us and looking after us and caring for our fellow men.
Absolutely. So the low-cost lenses that you invented, they're expected to bring sight to 30 million people by 2020. Does that make you really proud as a person today?
Well, I'm a bit like an Italian racing driver. I don't look behind me to see what's going on. That was a nice thing, and it would have been very easy to have said, I've done something that night, get on with my life and go and buy a villa in Fiji and get on with my life. But it's just a starting point. The reality is that showed me that you could change the world. On the back of my business card, there's a nice little thing that just says, change the world. And now I actually know that you can do that. So watch out, because we're going to do it for nutrition. What I would like my swan song to be is to, Ray Avery change global protein, energy, malnutrition treatment. That's a big ask. UNICEF hasn't cracked it, but I think I can. And I hope I convince enough people to follow me to do that. And if I can do that, and I've got enough years in the tank, who knows what the next thing might be after that. But it's self-belief is based, I think, on experience. For people that are successful, it's based on experience. Surviving, living under a railway bridge, building successful businesses, and showing that you can change global healthcare are great starting points for being dangerous. And now I'm in the last quarter of my life. Time is of the essence. Yeah. So time actually makes you much more dramatic, and you don't take rubbish and anymore. You just get on and do it.
And obviously building products that are actually needed out there is really important. And one of the things we identified from interviewing a lot of people is that perhaps Kiwis, we're building too many products that people don't actually need. So what would you say around that? What's your advice there?
Well, I think generally the two parts to that. First one is that we spend a lot of time making products that we don't really need as a society, that are just for entertainment and so on. They're not really good for our planet or our species or for our well-being. So 90% of the world's spending on healthcare is only spent on 10% of the world's population. That's us who live in Auckland and Palmerston North or whatever. But there's a whole world out there that needs to be taken care of. So my job is to actually, audit the books and come up with solutions to make the world a more egalitarian place. Kiwis have a huge advantage, because the one thing I've learned about Kiwis is, since my arrival in 1973, is that they have absolutely no respect for the status quo. They're not fond of rules. They get on and do things. And we actually change things on a global scale, whether it's to do with putting rockets into interstellar space from a company in Auckland, or whether it's people like Bill Buckley, who makes 90% electromagnets that charge up all the chips for your mobile phone, flat screen TV, and people like myself who come up with innovative technologies to make global healthcare accessible to the world. So it's not that we think differently in New Zealand, it's rather that we have the opportunity to believe in ourselves and dream big. Anybody in New Zealand can be anything they want to be, and there's very few countries in the world that that's true.
Absolutely. And Sir Ray, what is your dream still to come?
Well, my dream would be to live as long as possible. I remember somebody saying to me, I wouldn't like to be really, really old, because, I wouldn't know what to do with my life. And my response to those I've got a lot of things to do. I've got a real lot of things to do.
Yeah.
I budgeted for about 5,000 days. I hope by multitasking I can turn those into 10,000 days. But I want to do something really, really grand to justify what's happened historically, but also I think to be a lightning rod for other people who come along and say, if he can do that, I can do that. And they say that in Nepal, if you die and nobody remembers you, then you're dead. But if you die and people remember you, then you live on forever. And maybe that's my exit strategy, that I'd like to inspire enough people to say, let's get on with it, guys, let's change the world, let's all go out and make things that really make the world a better planet for us and our people. And then maybe you do live forever. And also, the one last thing which is very important is that above all of these things that I do for everybody around the world, and whether it be in blindness, nutrition, I actually want my two girls, Amelia and Anastasia, to think that I was a good guy.
Absolutely. And that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've just got a few quick fire questions to finish now. Having spent a lot of time in business, what would you sum up as your top sort of 2 or 3 bits of business advice for aspiring entrepreneurs?
In terms of business acumen, I think firstly you've got to be customer centric.
Okay.
Don't be product centric. You'll go bust if you concentrate on making products and then trying to design products that you try and convince your customer to buy. You'll go bust. If you are customer centric and you look at your customer statement of need, then make products that they actually want, you'll be successful. That's the first thing. Okay. The other thing is that nobody's as clever as all of us. You take all of the people in any particular room, and there will not be one person in that room who's clever than all those people. So that tells you need to get good people around you and identify what your skill sets are, and then fill in the gaps. And also the third thing would be to allow people to do their job.
Yeah.
Don't micromanage things.
True.
Trust people. Get the best team around you and let them help you to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. And what are you most proud of, Sir Ray?
The thing I'm going to do next.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and having been abandoned as a youngster in an orphanage, living under a bridge, and then going on to create world-class medical equipment, what would the 16-year-old boy you were think of the man you've become today?
Well, I don't think I could have told this 16-year-old boy anything particularly, because I think that I'm in awe of him. I'm in awe of him in how he survived, how he got out of the orphanage, how he began to start about setting his own education, going to the library and learning stuff. So I don't think I could actually have given him any advice. And to be fair, I think all of the trenches, and I think this is very relevant, very important for people, is that you can't necessarily re-engineer your life retrospectively, because you have to go through a whole series of processes to become the knowledge base that you become. So your failures and your successes are very much what determine who you are. And so for me, I had a very energetic problem as a young kid in terms of surviving a Holocaust, a 3-dimensional mayhem. That gave me certain skills of survival. Then I went to the business world and I learnt what an NDA is, and I know an information memorandum. I learnt business skills, and then I went on and made some money. And all of these things are very important learning processes, but your game plan changes as you go through life. I think everybody gets to the point when they're in their last quarter of their life when they actually start looking backwards and saying, what have I actually done? What has my life meant? You don't want to be what I used to be. I used to be the ANZ general manager, and that was my whole life. So I want people to start thinking about that so that they reverse engineer their life and say, I do have a plan of what I want to do. So I've been lucky. I've got to a point where I actually know what I want to do, and in the last quarter of my life I'm going to live my bucket list and achieve all the things that I want to achieve, and hopefully inspire enough people to carry on the work that I think is valuable when I'm gone. So I wouldn't tell the 16-year-old anything. I don't think you can, because they don't listen to you. My kids don't listen to me. All you can do is give them a background of inspiration and say, there was a wonderful thing the other day, a young girl who was writing a column about politicians, and she said, we don't trust politicians. Why is that? And who do you trust? And one of the people she trusted, which I was most proud of, one of the most proudest things of was this young 20-year-old woman. She was asked, who does she trust? And she said, I trust Ray Avery, he's a kick babe. I thought at the age of 67, if that's the way that some young girl thinks about you, then you've won. Because you've communicated, you've got past the age thing, you've got past, I'm communicating with her and making her believe that we actually can do something, that she's actually knows what trust's about. She might go on and aspire to be as good as that person. We're short of heroes. I haven't got many heroes because they've let me down over the years, and I want to live up to that. That's why I want my kids to think I'm a hero. I want you to think I'm a hero, and you to think I'm a hero, because that's the best I can be. If I can get you to believe in yourself, then I'm not going to die. The spirit of Ray Avery won't die. And just think what terror we can reap on the world and do good, real good by believing in ourselves. Yeah. So that's my gift. My gift is 16-year-old boy, couldn't be fixed. He was just part of a storyline. Now, the last quarter of my life, I'm getting dangerous, and I just want all of us to believe that we can do something really, really special. And if we all rose up and did it, we'd have a much better world. But unfortunately, what happens is life happens when you're making other plans and you've got to pay the mortgage and you don't actually believe that you can do anything. when you make that change and you say, yeah, I can do that, I can change the world, and you believe it, then you can. It's the crazy ones that are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones that do.
Absolutely. And Sir Ray, we're obviously all incredibly proud of what you've achieved, but more importantly, I think we're incredibly excited about what you're going to achieve in the future. So to finish, can you please look down that camera and tell us, what are your wise words for the people of New Zealand?
My wise words to everybody is to calculate how many days you've got left to live, dream really, really, really big, and love everybody around you. Treat everybody like they're your customer. Treat your daughter, your son, your mother as your first customers, and then start to dream bigger than that and say, how can I help you to get to where you want to do, and how can you help me get to where I want to be in my dream? And together, we may just be able to change the world.
Sir Avery, thank you so much. Cheers.